Hi, I'm Harlan Emil Gruber, and welcome to Portal to the New Earth. I'm so excited and honored today to have this incredible guest, Sacha Stone. I first learned of his work quite a number of years ago when he started a project called New Earth Project, I think it's called, and it had so many different facets. He had New Earth Communities, New Earth Nation. This now there's the website New Earth Horizon, which is kind of the umbrella for all of these New Earth projects. But Sacha is this global luminary who's been working for many years on many facets of this shifting of the guard, the changing of the guard, and bringing about the New Earth. So I just without further ado, just let him jump in and start to tell you his story and especially about this work he's doing. And but most importantly, this is being recorded on June 25th, 2025, just days after he convened this incredible event in Tennessee for the New Earth Nation project that they're focusing on right here in North America. Although he has projects in Bali, Mexico, and working on in Africa even. So we'll get a little recap of how that amazing event went, and also just all these different projects he's got going on to bring about the new Earth. So thank you, Sacha, for joining me today.
Well, very happy to see you, Harlan, and it was wonderful hooking up with you on this last Revelations tour that I just did. It took 4 months to get across America. I took a couple of weeks break in the middle, but it was a pretty intense 4 months, and I can tell you, I swore to myself I'd never do it again. So that's it. That's the last. I think it's the fourth time I've crossed America on this kind of social tour, and we ended up, of course, in Tennessee, or Tennessee, as the Cherokee would have it, in order to do the consecration and proclamation event there to proclaim New Earth, Tennessee, New Earth America. And in the heart of Middle America, we planted a beacon, a seed, and it was an epic and very momentous undertaking, as many thousands of people around the world will attest. We had a huge international audience looking into the live broadcast. We'd set up the proclamation theater in a massive barn not too far from our New Earth land holdings, but a state-of-the-art barn. And we had a lot of media there, and a packed house. And of course, incredible figures from around the world flew in for this event. And it was essentially a ceremonial event, a ceremonial seating in order to proclaim the emergence now of the new human, the long prophesied rainbow warrior tribe. And it was, in a sense, also putting the war powers on notice in an act of peace, and letting the war powers know that their age is over. And although that sounds like hippy-dippy bullshit to cynical liberal intellectuals, it is cynical liberal intellectuals who have been the enabling class to the satanic status quo for the last God knows how long. So we don't pay too much attention to that class. To good humans looking in from around the world, they understood what we were doing. To the constitutional sheriffs and peace officers, of course, Sheriff Richard Mack, the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association of the United States, was there, sat next to me for 5 hours on that judicial bench with his badge. And we had Laura Eisenhower coming in, great-granddaughter of the great Dwight Eisenhower, who first interfaced with aliens as a president of the United States. So though the telling of those stories needs to be aired, and Laura was helping to bring that forward to make up for the last over half a century of sequestering the truth of what was happening in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and so on. How the military-industrial complex came in and hijacked the whole world after the Second World War by design. So she was there. Dr. David Martin, the very brilliant Dr. David Martin, came in to do the keynote speech at the proclamation event. We had Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. come in, His Majesty King Edmund Kelly Silva Jr. Of the Sovereign Kingdom of Hawaii. We had the King of Kings of Indonesia. We had the grandmothers and the countless hereditary leaders and elders from around the world coming in on the big screen. We had Scott McKay of the Patriot Street Fighters coming. We just had this jamboree of good humans coming in and influences and icons. The great Hopi messenger Bertram came in representing the Hopi prophecies and brought that piece of magic to the equation. So really, this was about convening the family, the true family, the emergent family of humans committed to the elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness, committed to the reclamation of human dignity and the restitution of our true cultural identities, not the ones imposed by a Fabianist, globalist, Sabbatean agenda, which is what we're trying to now, not trying to, we are now breaking away from that ancient Atlantean model of dominion and control. So that was the importance of the proclamation of New Earth Tanasi. The reason why we'd chosen that land right in the heart of Middle America was because it represents the last stronghold in that sense of where the Bibles, the pitchforks, and the guns lean in together to say to the imposed federal authorities, hashtag fuck off and enough. You are not crossing this line. You have eroded too many of our civil liberties. We don't need to be in compliance with laws that affront our soul and that move against the grain of our humanity. So no, we will not be participating any longer in the war economy. We're now going to be reclaiming jurisdiction. We understand the law forms and how to do that. In our case, using the ecclesiastical privileges. But it's really more about how we unlearn much of what's been imposed upon us by these war powers and through the dominion of the war powers. And by the war powers, Harlan, I'm not just speaking about, the imminent thermonuclear Armageddon that's being postured by the great superpowers. I'm not talking about that kind of military intelligence. That's the least of it. I'm talking about 500 years of the hegemony of the crowns of Europe, the neo-colonial interest, the central bankster control and harvest of humanity that continues unabated to this day throughout Africa, Central South America, Southeast Asia, and actually throughout the whole world. Every single human being, whether they're watching your show here from, air-conditioned room in Scandinavia or in Manhattan or in Geneva or in Tel Aviv, it doesn't matter. You're all wage slaves. You have been harvested as a humanity into time and motion, wage slavery. So you work in order to pay bills. The bills are the totem of your life force, and that then is turned over to the state, the crown, the bank, and that becomes part of a harvest cycle. We then, have this insane amount of legislation and statutes and codes and ordinances and so-called laws that infract and infringe our civil liberties and our right to roam freely upon the surface of the earth, making love, creating art, being abundant, being prosperous, being affirmative, being expansive as children of God. So no longer do we even have those conversations because hashtag government is the thing that has come in and taken over the control. And of course, the word itself, govern, control, meant mind. In Latin, government means mind control. It always did. So those old Luciferic and Sabbatean archonic forces that have always been harnessing us and harvesting us into cycles of war and disease and poverty, that ends now in our age, right here, right now. And that's what that proclamation event was all about.
Oh, you just muted for a second. No, anyway, so thank you. That was a great first, introduction to what that was about. And of course, there is the full video of that available on the newearthhorizon.com website, and it also will be edited down, as you were saying, into a shorter, because it is 5 hours long of all these different people speaking. And one of the real key points, you mentioned such a variety of different people that came together, but you did specifically honor the Native Americans. And I'm connected with a Native American, a Cherokee spiritual teaching called sunray meditation. And the Cherokee were a very advanced culture living in North America before it became colonized and taken over by our current United States of America. And they really understood, first of all, their place through these teachings that I'm connected with. They understood that their spiritual lineage goes back over 100,000 years and connects to the Pleiades. So they had their star nation and star brother connection in their spirituality. And the way that they lived and the way they governed their society was in a very peaceful way. They had peace villages. If someone was out of alignment, they weren't put in prison. They were put in a peace village to learn to come back into centeredness and peace with all beings and themselves.
Right.
And that's what you were working on there, was honoring these ancient native Aboriginal humans that understood our relationship with each other and with nature. And that's a lot of what the new earth is
Well,
about, us coming
well,
back into that
it's
alignment.
more than that. It's more than that. So yes, you're absolutely bang on. But you think about this: that reconvening relationship with the primal Aboriginal First Nations aspect of our human genome is to say we are reconvening relationship with our cosmogenetic and archaeocosmological roots. Because to get back into communion with the Hopi and the Cherokee and the Navajo and the Lakota and the Vashona and the Amandabele and the Kalahari Bushmen and the First Nation peoples of Australasia, to get back in touch with the First Nation peoples is to touch the heavens and get back in touch with the star nations, because that's where the relationship continued unfettered and unabated, whilst you and I, white man, so to speak, were taking forward the forbidden Promethean flame. We were taking forward fire. We were given the fire element in that sense. We were the custodians of the fire element, and we took it forward to the worst possible extent by building thermonuclear Armageddon, by building atomic bombs and synthetic molecules. And so, and by desecrating the womb of Gaia and raping the womb of Gaia and bringing up the oil and the gas to the surface and then blowing it up and literally into a false light utility, and then selling that false light utility as hot electricity in order to power up the industries, in order to power up our lives using false light. So the cancers are as a direct result of electromagnetic frequencies issuing from copper wires wrapped around our houses and under our bedrooms while we're sleeping. Throughout our lives, we're in a Faraday cage of EMF toxic soup. So that EMF is an issue of the false light, of the fallen light of Atlantis, of hot electrical values, all of which have no place in God's kingdom. And so now that's why the free energy revolution has been such an important thing. That's why I was doing it 17, 18 years ago, hacking into the United Nations, becoming Director General at that time of the renewable energy sector, the breakthrough innovation sector, bringing Dr. David Martin in at that time to the UN, where we were trying through an initiative that I launched called the Exemplar Zero Initiative to get free energy technologies, bio and georemediation solutions into the marketplace. But we failed. We tried, but failed. Had we done that 17 years ago, the world would be a very different place. Had intergovernmentally we'd accepted that we had been under the control of the hegemony of these old oil and gas barons and their satanic statutes and codes and compliances that they'd put into the game, a century ago, the Rockefeller Rothschild Convention. So here we are. We're now on a precipice where we cannot continue that old imperial dominion game of scarcity inflationary economics. We can't continue to plunder the earth in order to get resources and blow them up on the surface. People are not standing for it. We understand the violation, the desecration of natural law that's occurring. So society is revolted against that. Humanity is revolted against that. And I'm not even going to talk about the climate change bullshit and the green agenda, which was a counter coup. It was a double psyop, an inversion psyop. Well, I'm not even going to go there. That's too complex. But the point I'm making is that good humanity have realized that we never needed to rape the planet in order to prosper. That quite the contrary, there are also epochs in our past, like Grand Tataria, the ancient civilizational golden ages that we have cyclically been through, that where we had etheric transmission of free energy technology, where we could move mountains using sound waves, where we were able to build ziggurats and pyramids in the desert that today we cannot even conceive of building, but we had the ancient technologies to do so. Well, how does that figure? So now this remembrance, this reconvention with the Hopi, with the Cherokee, with the First Nation peoples, the Aboriginal Dreamtimers and the Songliners, getting back into convention with that primal Aboriginal dream timing is how we remember, how that ancient, sophisticated memory comes back to us, is restored to us. I could also speak about how we are now on the counterpoint of the Noah and the Ark, the great deluge, which occurred 13 odd thousand years ago. We're literally on the flip of the hemisphere of that. We're going through this new emergent light field that we left behind 13,000 years ago. And this is the vibral light that issues from the central core of the galaxy. And in the last, the age of Aquarius is about the departure from the Piscean age in through that amazing light field of photons. We're literally moving through that photon band now at the level of our entire solar system. And as we are swinging through the spiral of the Milky Way, through this old vibral light field that we left behind 13,000 years ago, all the memories that we left behind 13,000 years ago that were captured when we fell into a galactic sleep cycle, those memories are in the quantum, in the Akashic field. We're literally reconvening with the memory field that we left behind. And that's why so many people nowadays are having this revelation, this awakening, this remembrance, because we literally touching again the vector, the quadrant of where we left behind our arcane memory 13,000 years ago. So you're going to find, and that's why kids are waking up at the age of 4 playing Tchaikovsky and Chopin in China. And, this emergence of the indigo children is connected to that, the remembrance of who we are. And so old hippies like you and me, who have been holding the flame, because we have still that primal innocence, you and I, Harlan, and I salute you for it. And I salute myself for it, for not allowing ourselves to become crusty, cynical, old, liberal, intellectual morons, clinking glasses at dinner parties and thinking about how clever we are because we can play linguistics over silverware. You and I don't do that. We're still out there in the mud dreaming the new earth into manifestation, and our pineals are not calcified and crusty, and we're able to participate in that dreaming. But really, it's the younger generations now over whom we have custodianship that we need to allow them to come up and to absolutely flourish. They have to be able to play with the imagination, unfettered. I keep telling people, stop imposing your bad syntax onto youngsters. Allow them to educate you.
You talked a moment ago about you didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of climate change and all that. And then you did address very clearly this, going back to this 13,000 year cycle and the photon belt that is elevating us and reconnecting us to our, divine connection to source consciousness. But, I work with this group called the Design Science Studio. And there are a lot of like 20, 30, 40-year-olds that are very much still kind of aligned under that veil of believing the whole climate change and believing all this technology and things is the way forward to create this new earth. And I would wonder if you wanted to just go on a little bit more, because that's the most difficult. It's people like that if they're watching this video of us speaking, they might just shut it off. They go, oh, these guys are just, idiots. They don't know what's really happening. The way it really works is science, and no, climate change is real. And they're still under that veil of the mind control, let's say.
Well,
And that,
so Let me
How
address
can
that,
you
Bob.
address those people? What could be said to realign them so that they can awaken? Because the people that are already aligned with the way we're thinking, they don't need to hear it. They already know this truth within themselves, just as we know it. It's
Arlen,
nice to hear it,
you
but
cannot redeem the irredeemable. So why bother? The people
okay.
again, I've been saying this for so many years, and I can only continue to restate it. Liberal intellectualism is a sickness. It's a mind virus. And liberal intellectuals who've got PhDs invariably and who are invariably well cultivated, cultured, educated people are the very worst in our ranks. Why? Because they're the ones who've been systemically mind fucked by the Fabianist agenda. They were the ones who were brought into the right schools and into the right colleges, the right universities, and they were fully programmed by the Cartesian, Newtonian, Einsteinian logic. And that's fine. But that is so out of kilter with the true genius of supernature. The genius of supernature you will find with the Maasai warriors and the Kalahari Bushmen and the Aboriginal Dreamtimers when you walk with them through a desert without having to have a glass of water for 24 hours, barefoot, by the way, in the in the middle of the day, and you're able to eat things, and they can find the herbs and the medicaments from roots and from mycelium and from bark of trees and from that's supernatural genius exists far, far away from liberal intellectualism. Liberal intellectualism is Promethean. It's the idea of us being able to reach the heavens and with waxen wings. And eventually the sun melts the wax and we plummet to the ground. That's what's happening wholesale. What has liberal intellectualism done for us? Or what has intellectuality or intellectualism done to us? It has built the bomb and it has built synthetic viruses. It is transhumanizing us. It is doing the work of the devil. So science in that sense is utterly corrupted. Academia is utterly corrupted. The understanding of geology, of geography, of astrology, of astronomy, of all of these the ologies, all of these systems are very contained and sequestered. This has been the problem. The real knowledge base is connected to the shamanic instinct, connected to the hook-nosed grandmothers in Bulgaria living in caravans. They know a great deal more. They've got far more of the wisdom flame than any PhD will ever have in botany or in syntropic agroforestry or in anything to do with healing the human body or healing the planet. So this is what I'm talking about. We've tried to organize ourselves. And that's what academia has been and what academia has tried to do. What that means is it has created specialization. It has created specialized focus. So what is it you want to do, Johnny? Johnny wants to become a pilot. Okay. So Johnny then starts learning systems and aeronautics and aerospace and how to fly airplanes at the expense of everything else. So he doesn't know how to read the sun, moon, and stars. He doesn't know how to bake bread. He doesn't know how to plant tomatoes. He doesn't know how to do anything other than that. And that becomes a sickness. So he's become very, very capable in a very unique focus. This is the way of the world today. Academia has created specialization, and it has robbed us of general knowledge and general acumen and general skills and capabilities. So we don't function now as whole system human beings. We function only as a specialized cog in the wheel of a particular element or focus, which is going to generate, as an industry, going to generate money. And then you're lucky enough or cursed, in my view, to get your pension and to get and that's it. And as long as you're plugged into the game and you do exactly what you're told by the statute book or by the ordinances and codes and the bylaws that are created for your little sector, you might just get through life without being on the street. So that's an abomination. And that's what we have to completely now end. So I speak about all these subjects to the liberal intellectuals that I meet. The climate change thing, environmentalism, all that environmentalism / climate change has been designed to do is to conflate the notion of scarcity economics, that we're running out of shit. We're running out of oil, we're running out of gas, we're running out of gold, we're running out of air, we're running out of water, we're running out of time, we're running out of life force. So this is clever stuff. That's Zeta draconian think. And that's been imposed upon humanity. And right now, all of these millions of people rushing around on the streets with their protest banners and trying to participate in that dialectic, they are pathetic because what they're simply trying to do is find relevancy in their utterly irrelevant lives. So it's a kind of vicarious way of being a frontline activist. Pick up a placard, pick up a picket, and go out and stand and throw tomatoes. That is not activism. That's got nothing to do with activism. But that's what we've entered into, this very, very shallow realm where most humans on the streets of most cities are simply played into the dialectic by those same socio-political and economic forces.
Yeah, I know. I kind of feel like that was a little bit of a derail to even try to address those issues, and that there really isn't any way to talk to those people to change what they are. We
No.
can just set our own example and tune in. And what you were saying, though, about that, scarcity mindset, the shift that we're going into is really much more profound than we all probably realize, in that our mind and our thoughts create a reality, and our understanding of that is going to bring about this new earth very quickly and very effortlessly because of this way that the universe actually functions, out of
Yeah.
abundance, out of creation. And so what I'd like to spend most of the rest of our time talking about is how much incredible work you've done on creating actual new earth communities. You have your new earth haven in Bali as your base, but also in Mexico, the Bacalar community is starting. The Tennessee that you just have, and of course Africa you've been talking about, and just everything you're doing to actually set up real world places that people come together and start to live in this new mindset, to lead the way, to be that morphogenetic resonance field of understanding. And of course, we are on the verge. I've been studying free energy since 1990 when I picked up a physics book called Zero Point Energy. And I've studied so many aspects of that very closely. Of course, there's many different scientists out there that write and talk about it. And the main reason when I talk to people about free energy isn't that we don't understand it and don't have the technology. It's the consciousness and mindset that doesn't allow us to have it. We're still locked into, you have to pay your electric bill. And of course, in our current military thing, if they had free energy and used it for negativity, that would not work very well either. So if you just want to riff on all
Well,
of the
we've
new
we've
earth
had free
and
energy for forever. We've had free energy forever. We had free energy in the ancient Tatarian times, and that's fairly recently. That's within the last couple of hundred years. We've had anti-gravitational technology. I mean, my 4 hour lecture that I do on my private tours, which I've been doing for the last 4 months in America, I show film. I show photographs and filmic evidences of anti-gravitational devices working with human beings operating them. I show free energy systems. I talk about all of this stuff in great lurid detail, and then go into the science, the physics, and even the hyperdimensional physics of that. And then I talk about the socio-political and socio-economical aspect of it, and why and who were behind the takedown of these technologies, and who it served, and so on and so forth. So more or less what we've been talking about here. But no, we've got all of the solutions. And my own organization, New Earth Technologies, we are working within our own jurisdiction now. Part of what we were doing with the proclamation event was establishing that line in the sand with the jurisdiction that we've now created, which is fully protected, incidentally, from all imposition. There is no municipal or federal authority or transnational authority that has the right to step 1 foot over the threshold into New Earth Tennessee, for instance, our land. And what we will be doing in our jurisdictions all around the world is moving forward with quantum computation and with so-called free energy technology engineering. So we've got the solutions already. We've got them in our laboratory in Eastern Europe. We've got them in our laboratories in Southern Africa, and now in North America. This is unstoppable. This is not something which can be stopped. I mean, I've been at this game with the energy tech for 20 years. There's a reason why the UN asked me to be Director General, 17 years ago in that sector, is because I have an expertise there. And my foundation, Humanitad, had been involved for many years, even before that, in helping to protect and ring fence technologists and engineers who have been involved in this area of science. So the fact of the matter is, we are, in my estimation, 5 to 7 years away from complete 0 point, meaning to say where we will be, all of those secrets will be fully explicit, fully out in the public domain. Right now, of course, we can power up tractors and cars and combine harvesters with hydroxy. That's easy. We've been doing that for 50 years. Sam Myers was doing it many decades ago. Of course, he was murdered. Many of these good scientists have been murdered. We've got multiple different hydroxy systems ourselves right now, and we're tinkering with where is the best way to deploy them into retrofitting diesel vehicles and petrol combustion engines. Is that the best? Now we're dealing with the scientists who've got plasma generators. And so the plasma generator looks even more interesting than the hydroxy water-powered systems. And then we've got magnetomotors, which are powering up 30 kilowatts on perpetual magnetic motion. And that's a fact. Now, studying the rate of decay of the magnets and when they're likely to need to be replaced, that becomes an issue. At this stage, it looks like you won't need to replace them for 9 to 10 years. So what are you talking about? Perpetual free energy magnetic motor generation for 10 years, 30 kilowatts, that can power up an entire village. That's free energy. Now, you get to even more advanced technology solutions than that. And we're exploring them. Then you get into anti-grav. Then you get into hyperloop and all sorts of things, jump gate technology. We could speak at length about all of this. And again, there are stuff in the military intelligence. There are guys in the military intelligence complex, whistleblowers who have tried to tell the world about this for the last 20, 30 odd years, principally. But it's been going on a long time, but back since the Philadelphia experiment. It goes back to when we first, split the atom and opened up the fabric of time-space and allowed extraterrestrial entities, intelligences to come into the 3D temporal realm and start to do technology transfer at that time with our military. So that was where Dwight Eisenhower becomes a very important figure, and why his great-granddaughter Laura Eisenhower was with me last week at the proclamation event to remind the world of that. So, in a sense, we're on this cusp of powering up our entire planet outside of the hegemony of the central bankers, outside of the oil and gas barons, outside of the hegemony and the control and the dominion of all of those old forces. So let's see where it takes us. I mean, again, this is now about the new dreaming and how you and I and our community of souls dream into manifestation reality. So there are no rules in that sense. We're just now having to reconfigure ourselves, remember our majesty, stop identifying with the insane statutes of a war machine and of government and of the Catholic Church and of those old crusty arcane institutions like the United Nations, like the Bank of International Settlements, like the World Health Organization, like any agency or corporate fiction. A corporation is a corpse. It's a dead thing. That's why they're called corporations. And governments masquerading. They are privately owned corporations masquerading as governments. So every government, as I've been saying for 15 years, is a privately owned corporation, and its function is to fleece, racketeering, and fleecing of the populace. Harvest of humanity, sacrifice of innocence, wittingly and or unwittingly, is the preserve of government. It's what they do. And I move amongst governments. I move amongst heads of state and amongst ministers and amongst the officials and the bureaucrats and the technocrats. So I've never separated myself from that milieu. I've always engaged with them. I'm constantly having meetings with governments and so on. I'm heading back in 2 weeks' time into Central Africa to pick up the hard conversation and diplomacy and negotiations with the African governments that we're engaged with within the New Earth Initiative. And every single time I've sat down and spoken to a powerful political leader, I have this kind of conversation with them. And it's deeply refreshing to them. because they read the books as well. They've also had the dreams. They also understand that we're under some titanic control and that we need to free ourselves from it. The new breed of leadership, political leadership, and the royal establishments of the world, the hereditary establishments, are also open to this new quantum conversation. We're moving into a whole new paradigm, Harlem, and it's all good.
Right. So you want to go into a little more detail about these places that you've actually have established or will be establishing, and what's
Oh,
going on with your New Earth communities, the actual real on the ground people
sure.
starting to
Well,
build and
again,
live.
I don't build communities, so be clear about that.
Okay.
People like you, I don't build communities. What I do is I forge, or to the best of my abilities, myself and my very, very noble colleagues, and there are a great many of them that I have to thank for all of the tasking, all of the heavy lifting. I do a lot of heavy lifting myself, but I've got incredible people around me. And it's not the Sacha Stone Roadshow, and I just detest that idea. This is the New Earth Roadshow. And I am, in that sense, the obvious spokesperson for it. But when I speak about, my team of people, there are people on my team who've been there for decades, decades in the basement, driving the processes forward, without whom I wouldn't be here talking to you. I've got lawyers and law experts, and I've got directors of all different areas of focus connected to technologies, to law, to community development, for instance, some of whom you know. So I would have to read a list of about 130 names in order to explain my administration, so to speak. And that crosses 5 continents as well, incidentally. But I can tell you that the project templates that we've begun, Bali, of course, the New Earth Haven, Akasha, which we launched in 2017. And that was really about building out a bioarchitected playground, which elevates art, beauty, and consciousness. And that's proven to do just that. And it's fraught with complexities and difficulties. We've never made money with the project. It's always just running on borderline. It was never about making money or generating a thriving business. It was about elevating art, beauty, and consciousness and creating a beacon. And we've done that. We've done that with excellence. We've hosted the historic cultural festival in 2019, convening all of the ancient kingdoms of Indonesia for the first time in their history, with all the Rajas and Sultans and kings of kings and kings coming in together. Historic stuff. We've had so much ceremony there and so many micro festivals and convened so many important events. The most recent one was a few weeks ago where Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. flew in and Steven Seagal from Moscow and the high priests and kings and attended that, and community in Bali attended that. And that was the eighth fire ceremony being conducted over a week long in Bali at the New Earth Haven, and powerful, powerful stuff. So we're constantly using that. New Earth Haven is a place which constantly threads the narrative and continues to pulse and to keep that breath moving in the New Earth. And then we've got the New Earth project in Mexico, and we've got some community on the ground there. That project has taken 2 years just to get the compliance. Has been much more difficult because of the regulations, the very thing that we fight against. But by the grace of God, that's going terrific. Yesterday, I had lunch with our lawyer and our architects as I landed here in Mexico, and we're thrilled with the way things are now going to move. But we've got a lot of community, a lot of people committed to that project, and that's a beautiful thing. We have the most exquisite land, which we own. That project is moving forward. In fact, it's going to move forward into a much bigger venue than originally planned. And I'm very pleased about that, because I regard this part of the world as my home. Bacala Laguna, for me, the Mayan Riviera, is kind of home base. I spend a lot more time here than in Bali. I spend 2 to 3 weeks a year in Bali now, even though it's a stunning place. I think we've got about 35 odd staff, what have you, out there. And I go out once a year now myself. But Mexico for me is now integral. Tennessee, which we just proclaimed and consecrated a few days ago, as you just said, Beautiful. That's going to move very hard and fast. We have an incredible project director leading that, Ethan Lucas, and he's driving the full project out there. And he and I will make some big pronouncements in the coming weeks once we unveil the master plan. We'll definitely do that within about 6 weeks from now. Beautiful land, about 60 acres. And again, setting that up as a template so we can syndicate it as quickly as possible, because we've got so many people who want the model, who want to move into a place which is a microgrid, which is powered up by its own technologies, protected by its own plasma field technologies, water structurized by its own advanced water structurizing technology, food that is grown in its own completely primal biospheres with these vertical greenhousing that we're kicking off in the United States, and so on and so forth. Africa is the big play next, and that's why I'm back there in a couple of weeks' time to pick up the negotiations, because we're talking there about thousands of square kilometers of land, huge micronation satellites with their full autonomous jurisdiction, where we can take forward quantum computing, aerospace, and what have you, anti-grav, the very advanced technological pursuits which we want to engage with. We've got the scientists, we have the engineers, and the scientists, the best in the world. None of them are younger than 70 years of age, incidentally. They're all old school guys who were doing that stuff and, connected to the Tom Beardens and the Raymond Reifs of this world. We're talking about the Tesla 2.0 science acumen. And we've got many of them. We're creating the protections for them, building their homes, and we're going to be building those technology solutions as quickly as possible. Not that they haven't already been built. The prototypes are done and dusted. Just 10 days ago, I was in the secret lab in North America with a group of these guys, witnessing firsthand a number of these technologies. Staggering. Now we're going to take them forward into rapid manufacture and deployment in our communities. So this is the thing. We're not looking, again, to go head to head with the war powers or with the high street. Have no interest in threading these solutions into the high street. No interest at all. These will be empowering our 0-point micronation satellite communities, and they will take off all around the world. And there are other communities that we will do technology transfer with and knowledge transfer with happily. So doesn't have to be branded New Earth, but those communities have got to be commensurate and fully coherent with the metric and with the ethic. And they have to have the jurisdictional containment. So that's the key piece here. You have to have jurisdiction, fellowship, technology. That's the trifecta that is going to make these so-called communities actually functionable. Why? Because you need to have, in order to have food independence, you need to have energy independence. And in order to have anything, you have to have fellowship. If you don't have that essential critical community, you've got nothing to work with. That's the currency. Fellowship, technology, and jurisdiction. You can't build the technologies and contain them if you don't have the jurisdiction. And by jurisdiction, I mean outside of the war powers, outside of the corporation masquerading as government, outside of the federal and municipal authority, quote unquote. Very important people understand that. Jurisdiction, technology, food independence, water independence. There's water everywhere, primary water or etheric water. You can pull it out of the air. That's the least of the concerns. And fellowship. Once you've got those things, you've then got to be a bit sophisticated about how do you then, have a cup? How do you have a telephone? How do you have chairs, lamps, cutlery, crockery, roof tiles, floorboards, faucets, bathtubs, bicycles, wheelbarrows? How do you have all of those things? Well, that's a simple answer. We go to something called true cost economics, which I'm critically focused on with New Earth. True cost economics is about having hemp production very nearby. So allocate some of your land holdings into hemp agriculture. Once you've got your threshing done, you've got your fibers and you've got your powders, you can then have a small hemp hub. It could be the size of this room that I'm sitting in right now. And you can have extrusion, cast and mold, and 3D printing capability where you can literally print the components. for your ladders, your bicycles, your wheelbarrows, the things that you need. You can have AutoCAD now. You can have designers in China and in South Africa and in Scandinavia, all connected through Meta helmets, designing toothbrushes, designing bicycles, designing wheelbarrows. They can be the greatest designs on earth, connected to your own community. And you simply print and extrude, cast, and mold them out of your locally produced hemp. What have you got? You've now got a bicycle that's worth $3,000 on the high street, but it's just cost you $35 in real terms because you have locally sourced hemp. And it's 10 times the tensile strength of steel. Go figure. We can build all of our automobiles, all of our anti-gravitational devices, all of our rockets, if we want to play that silly game, with hemp. So hemp equals true cost economics, essentially. We conducted a study recently where we looked at the 300 products that service a human being from cradle to grave. And 95+% of those products essentially can be manufactured out of hemp. So it's about knocking out the Wall Street, knocking out Walmart, knocking out the high street, knocking out the cheap knockoffs from China, imports and exports, knocking out all of that toxic nonsense and getting back into bioresonance. Fabrics, everything can be made out of hemp. Carpets, bed sheets, linen, everything can be made out of hemp. It feeds your livestock. It's food. It's cancer treatment. It's everything. It's hemp ethanol if you want to power up your vehicles. But we've got better solutions than that. But there you have it, true cost economics. Now, why would you then want or need a municipal authority or a federal authority? Why would you need any third-party intervention? If you have the fellowship, you have the land, you have the agronomy, your own economy connected to the earth. You've got true cost economics. You've got state-of-the-art design and implementation. So we're not talking about going back to the Stone Age. We're not talking about all shuffling around in sackcloth. And, we're not talking about downgrading life. We're talking about massively augmenting it into ancient futures.
So, you emphasize fellowship and that we don't need these big organic governments to rule over us, but we do need to everyone awaken to their own divine sovereignty in this fellowship to not want to play this game of control. And, talking about hemp being this incredible plant, but I see, that just aligning with nature has so many of the solutions. Like in this crazy city design that I had a AI draw for me, I'm seeing our new earth and also all these places you're setting up. They're like seeds of the new earth. They're coming together where people are living in alignment with this way that will eventually then grow and spread for all humanity over the whole earth. But we still have this, very set in place consciousness that a lot of people are still under that rule.
Why do you even talk about them all? Why do you even refer to them consistently? You got to stop that.
You're right. I do. I shouldn't be even talking, but setting up these seeds of the new earth, which you're doing, you talk a lot about these scientists and all this new technology. And the thing is, my sense of the new earth is that we're not going to be walking around in sacks, but it's also going to be very much aligned with nature, and that we will be almost growing cities, not building them.
That's biomimicry. Biomimicry and bioresonance and bioarchitecture. When you understand biomimicry, you understand bioarchitecture, and you understand bioresonance, absolutely, Harlan, you're bang on. But I can tell you it gets even more advanced than that. We can genetically splice seeds of an acorn that will grow the tree into a house. You splice dragonfly DNA in and dolphin DNA and octopus DNA, and you can build in genetically program the bioluminescence and the windows of that house.
But I think
quite seriously.
I think you're still thinking in a very 3D mechanistic terms, we don't actually need to be doing this genetic modifying by splicing. It's on the consciousness level, like the higher dimensional genetic engineering, which actually gave us our human form and gave us all the incredible fruits and vegetables and plants
Agreed.
that we see in
Agreed.
animals. They weren't done by a scientist genetically splicing DNAs.
Well,
These were
I
done
beg to
through
differ.
consciousness to
I beg
create
to
in
differ.
alignment with life.
I beg to differ. The splicing and dicing has been absolutely foundational and integral to the genesis of all living systems. I guarantee you that. You study the Enki and Lil Ninhursag phenomenon. It was absolutely about science and about them taking the grunting, squawking hominids and putting their God King DNA in with them. And that's how divine right to rule and kingships and blue blood and all of that emerged. So we are the issue, the progeny of splicing and dicing. I like what you're saying because ultimately what you're saying is correct when we truly actualize into the fully, I won't say 12 strand because it's way beyond 12 strand, but the fully actualized Homo luminous, divine human capacitance. You are right. We will be able to imagine and instantaneously manifest. And you're correct about that. But there's a process, I believe, in the meantime, where we are looking at the regenesis of, through frag genetics. We now know through frag genetics, and I'm part of the reason why I've been exposing this to the world in the last 3 years, through the Lazarus Symposium and through Dr. Tony in Romania, the frag geneticist, proving that if you take a DNA from a domestic horse and they can extrapolate junk DNA from a domestic horse, extrapolate off it using simulation programming, and they can grow the full piece of DNA. They can then also, using computation, extrapolate off that grown piece of DNA taken off the junk DNA of the horse. And what do they see? A unicorn emerges, a Pegasus emerges. So we now know that in the so-called junk DNA, the junk DNA in humanity is the true DNA, the real divine cosmic DNA. Once we understand that craft of advanced science, spiritual science, we'll be reactivating that junk DNA. But it has got to do with, I wouldn't say dicing and splicing. That's a bit ugly. But we still have a lot of playing to do with the understanding of the true craft of spiritual science.
Right, because we are very much in the 3D world, living here on this, what I guess 3D shifting to 5D Earth. And so we still have to work in these terms of actually doing it that way rather than from this much higher dimensional, highly evolved way of the light physics, where it's done through consciousness directly and not through manipulation of matter. But I think
Yeah.
one of the things I just learned recently through one of the talks I was listening to is our conception of DNA. It's very much, we know it as these molecules, it stands for, DNA stands for deoxynucleic acid and 2 strands. And that's this limited 3D understanding. And now there's been a lot of talk. I first heard of 12-strand DNA way back in 93 when I read Barbara Marciniak's Bringers of the Dawn. And at first I'm like, what? How can you have 12 strands? But now it's been bantered about for so long. But these are kind of accessing higher dimensional aspects. It's the shifting of the consciousness and seeing reality as something much more than this 3D mechanistic, molecules, and that there's light encoded vibrational frequencies. And to use the word DNA is almost incorrect then in
Correct.
talking about this higher dimensional 12-strand
Correct.
DNA, because it's not just molecules in 3D physicality. It's the blueprint, it's the consciousness blueprint that brings about things into reality. And so, yeah, it's really, we're on this, chipping away from 3D to a higher, but we're still in 3D. So I understand very much what you're saying and how we're going about doing it.
Well, you think about the 12 strand, it's the 13th element, which is also the fifth element, which emerges once those 12 strands are interlocked or interwoven. It's really the 13th element which emerges, which is the seat and the root of that divine revelation that will occur. But we have this understand, the number 12, the reason why 12 is written into the 12 apostles, into the 12 houses of the, astrology and so on. There's a very good reason, but it's the 13th house. The 13th house of all of these is the secret source, the real element that is going to give fusion to the divine immanence, to the immanent template of perfection, which will spontaneously erupt. That's the vertical ascension event which we're hurtling toward. By my reckoning, we'll be alive to see it in 2046.
Right. And, anyway, this has been such a great conversation. And I know, when you give your talks, they're typically 3 hours long, and we just want to keep this on point. So I'd love to just, spend another few minutes of anything you feel like when I saw you speak at recently at the New Living Expo, and Deborah Gisty was asking you questions about how you see the new earth coming about. And you so eloquently put it into words. Just the final recap of what it is that, you can offer people to help us align into this shift that's taking place. And yeah, that would be great, if you could
Well,
summarize.
for me, Harlan, it all comes down to attention, to the where we lean in and where we place our attention, because that is the piece that I contribute to this multiverse. It's the piece that you contribute. Anyone watching your podcast now are placing their attention toward you and I and what we say, and we are in communion with their plasma projection. So their mind is entangled through the quantum into my words and my expression in the here and now and yours. And so we, the three of us, the audience participant, you and I, are actually the ones involved right now in creating some new magic, some new thing. It's where we place our attention that matters the most. And my salutary recommendation to all humans who still complain about anything in this world is stop complaining, cease and desist from that to the best of your ability, and start to simply recognize that the geometry of the living moment is perfect always in all ways and can only ever be thus. So we are always situated right here, right now, in the most perfectly appointed and perfectly anointed vector in our soul stream. So you are never a victim of something. And even if you find yourself in a shitty predicament right now, don't have much money, have the wife has just run out with the kids and left you, you can't pay the rent, everything is a shit storm. And God knows we all move through shit storms in life. We, all of us, hit the cul-de-sac, the concrete wall at different points in our life, the loss of a beloved, the discovery that we have a stage 3 tumor. There can be all sorts of reasons why we feel that we're locked in the matrix, into an irreconcilable scenario. That is always the perfect storm. Every moment in your life is always the perfect vector, provided you have the grace to bear witness to it. You have the power to unlock any situation, no matter how awful it may look and appear. But it really is about the grace, about being disidentified with the fear, disidentified with the psychological or emotional trauma patterning. So to be able to be in a shitty situation, look at it and behold it and be interested in it. This is a vector. This is a mood. This is what sorrow feels like. This is what grief feels like. This is what, it's okay to feel it, but don't identify with it. You are not it. It is not you. Allow it to simply move through you. And that's when so-called negative flux is always there as a reminder of your divinity, precisely to remind you to not identify with it, but rather to retouch and re-identify with the immanent within you, which is that which is bearing witness to the grief, or bearing witness to the sorrow, or bearing witness to the anger or the bitterness or whatever it is, the fear. And so all of those shades of contrast, those emotions of contrast are there to serve you. They're literally kneeling before you. They're not trying to devour your soul and say, give up all hope. You know, you've come to the end of the line. Quite the contrary. They are kneeling before you and offering the contrast against which you must remember your divinity. That for me is always the Zen cone that I would offer anyone in any situation. And God knows I offer it to myself consistently.
Great. I know that is such a key element to, connect to that divine source and not identify with the craziness of the world, especially right now, and then to bring that peace to the world. I mean, I feel, that's been brought up a lot with the healing of war isn't to go out and hold a sign and say, stop doing it. Heal the war within yourself
Oh,
and be the
bro.
peace in the world. So thank you so much. Of course, you've got, besides the newearthhorizon.com website, which will be linked below, you have sachastone.com and your Lazarus Initiative, which you host regularly, incredible people that regularly come together, and people can see a bit of that for free or join at different levels to get this incredible, people that you bring together to share so much valuable information regularly. I mean, you work tirelessly. It's unbelievable how much you both travel and how much you put out there to help people to learn and understand this. So if you just want to just recap each of those, or they'll be
Sure.
all linked in the description here.
Yeah.
How they access your work and how they can follow you, and to stay on track with what you have to offer.
Well, I would just say that anyone interested in really leaning into the information that we're bringing forward, again, things like frag genetics or archaeocosmology and cosmogenesis, these very abstruse and but fascinating areas of focus, which are really defining the new quantum human as we raise ourselves from the dead as Lazarus, resurrect ourselves from the fallen light of Atlantis, from the death state, and move now into the quantum supernature. Lazarus Initiative, I set up 4 years ago precisely in order to cater to that community. So we have to have secure servers because we speak about very shocking things. I have fascinating people coming forward, many hundreds of them over the last 4 years. I believe the very best in class thought leaders, consciousness leaders, scientists, people involved in the vanguard and most esoteric aspects of reality and of science.
You,
So
you
join the
recently
Lazarus Initiative for that reason.
you recently had one of my favorite people I've been working with the last few years, Rebecca Rose Barfoot, Sirius Blue. I identify with her and love her work so much. I mean, what she's been through, but the best part that I love about her is when she speaks. To imitate her, she speaks from such a state
Mhm.
of calmness and her energy that comes through. So I was so grateful that you featured her recently among you say, over hundreds of people that you have on. So thank you so much. We're really coming from a very similar path and understanding of our reality as humans here. And that was wonderful to have her. And then, of course, SachaStone.com, that's basically under your name. That's kind of like a way to access these various different
Yeah,
things. If you
it's
go
it's
to
it's a
Sacha Stone,
springboard.
it'll link to Lazarus, of course, and
Yeah.
other things. And yeah, if you want to just recap the other two websites or why people will want to go
No,
to them.
that's it. I
Yeah.
pretty much I'm all spoken out. A New
Yeah.
Earth Horizon is speaking about the New Earth vista, so to speak. That's why it's called New Earth Horizon, so that people can springboard to the New Earth University or to any of the projects in Mexico or Tennessee or Bali, Indonesia. The one in Lombok, which we'll be announcing shortly, that's a very big one in Asia. A beautiful project that we're planning to launch or release information on that within the next few weeks. And then, of course, Africa, which is the big play. And then it'll continue to franchise elsewhere. So New Earth Horizon, they're all interconnected.
Right.
SachaStone.com is really people interested in my blah, blah, and how I am focusing my community into different areas of focus. And there's also a library there. And of course, the Lazarus Initiative, as I just said, is where people, if they're really interested in this quantum learning, become a member of that community, and that's the most focused group that I've got.
Great, Sasha. Well, this is so great. Thank you for your time today and for everyone who joined us to listen to this. And I hope you get inspired. And we're all on the path. It's really keep focused in the peace, and the new earth is imminent. And I'm just so grateful we had this chance to connect. So thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time.
brother. Lovely seeing you.